What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Bible Thump. Recently, there's been a lot of conversation around the topic of race, and as an avid nerd of Bible stories, one of my friends asked me how the Bible addresses race, even going so far as to say, no black people appear in the Bible, so why do black people feel so attached to this book that they don't even appear in? Wow, that is a lot to unpack. First off, there are definitely black people in the Bible. In fact, the black church likely predates the white church. You see, the book of Acts starts off with Jesus telling his disciples to spread the gospel to Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. And the disciples do so in that order. Acts 2 through 7 deals with the church in Judea, the very first church built by the disciples. In Acts 8, Philip goes to Samaria and a couple of the other disciples follow. And in that same chapter, Philip leaves Samaria to go to the ends of the earth. And the first person he runs into is an Ethiopian eunuch. And this guy actually had a very important role in the Ethiopian Empire. He was the treasurer to the Kandake, the queen of the Ethiopians. Philip sees the Ethiopian reading a scroll from the book of Isaiah, and he asks the Ethiopian, "Do you understand what you're reading?" And the Ethiopian responds, "How can I understand if no one explains it to me?" Solid lesson there for Christians, which makes a lot of sense. The texts in Isaiah are very cryptic, and the passage that the Ethiopian was reading was a prophecy that Isaiah had made hundreds of years ago about the Messiah, which gave Philip a great opportunity to tell him about the fulfillment of that prophecy through Jesus Christ. After Philip explains this to the Ethiopian gains understanding, and he asks to be baptized by Philip. And Philip does so. He baptizes him right there. They're at a river, and he baptizes him in the river. And then the Ethiopian continues on his journey. And to the best of our knowledge, that is the first witness outside of Judea and Samaria, which means that would be the first non-Jewish, non-Samaritan person to hear the gospel that we know of. And when the Ethiopian returned to his people, he likely shared that same gospel with others. And that would have been the start of the first church outside of Judea and Samaria. Even when he returns and starts sharing the gospel, it wouldn't have been too far out of left field even for the Ethiopians back home, because they already had ties to the Jewish people from a long time ago, back in the day of Solomon. You see, Solomon was well known for being incredibly wise. His wisdom was known throughout many, many kingdoms, and he was visited by the Queen of Sheba, who was herself thought to be Ethiopian. So the Ethiopians already had a long history of a relationship with the Jewish people, even some believing that she had a son with Solomon. Solomon, by the way, has an entire book, the Song of Solomon, which is written about his lover. And his lover, in the book, describes herself as being black. So we know that there were black people in the Bible, and at times even prominently featured in the Bible. But the authors don't really go out of their way to say so. And there's a very good reason for that. Race, as we know it, was not a way that people were divided back in biblical times, and it wouldn't be used for thousands of years. The idea of races being a division of people wasn't used until the 16th century. The Jewish people really only had one major way that they categorized humanity. That was a Jew or a Gentile. Either you were God's chosen people or you weren't. Now there is one major exception to this categorization. A group of people who aren't exactly Jews and they aren't exactly Gentiles. And these are the Samaritans. You see, when God gave Moses the law, there were specific instructions for the people of Israel not to intermarry with other nations. Now that got a little complicated when the people of Israel and Judah were taken into captivity by Assyria and Babylon. You see, the prophets told the people to settle down in captivity. "Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all the exiles whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon, build houses and live in them, and plant gardens and eat their produce. Take wives and become the fathers of sons and daughters, and take wives for your sons and give your daughters to husbands, that they may bear sons and daughters and multiply there and do not decrease." So some took this command to mean that they should keep on taking wives and making babies within the nation of Israel, only with other Israelites, while others took this command to mean that they should marry into the land that they've been exiled into. And this disagreement is the basis for the division between the Jewish people and the Samaritans. And that disagreement caused the Jews to look down on the Samaritans because they believed that they had broken a law. And hundreds of years later, we have Jesus, and the Samaritans are still being looked down upon by the Jewish people. Perhaps you've heard of the story of the Good Samaritan. This is a story that Jesus tells as an answer to someone who was an expert in the Jewish law. And he asked a question to Jesus about what the definition of the word neighbor is in the law, love your neighbor as yourself. And he had asked Jesus, what is the extent to the word neighbor? What does that mean? Who am I supposed to love as my neighbor? In response, Jesus tells this story where a man is walking along the highway, he gets robbed of all his belongings, he gets beaten and left for dead. As the man's laying there dying on the side of the road, he gets passed by a priest and a Levite, both men who are supposed to represent God to the Jewish people. Both these men cross to the other side of the road to pass the man who's left for dead. The next person to come across this man on the side of the road is a Samaritan, someone who the Jews look down on. It's the Samaritan who comes to help the man, treats his wounds, and puts him on his mount that he was riding, and then takes him to the next town, pays for an inn and all the man's medical expenses. So this story isn't just about a good person, but a Samaritan, a person of mixed ethnicity, who comes and helps a Jewish man, knowing full well that the Jews look down on the Samaritans just because of their ethnicity. And it's in that situation that Jesus shows us that the right thing to do is to love your neighbor. And he tells the man who asked the question, go and do the same. Jesus very clearly understands the relationship between oppressed people groups and the groups that oppress them. And he uses those relationships to get his point across. And in doing so, he teaches us a very important message, that those relationships, while very real, do not affect what is right. No matter what your view of someone is, or your relationship to them, or their racial or ethnic differences, justice stays the same. And doing what's right isn't always what's fair. The Samaritan in the story didn't gain anything. He lost a ton of time and money helping out the Jewish man. But that doesn't change the fact that it was the right thing to do.